Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramisar, and I don't often have nuns in the program. When I do have a nun, I'd like it to be Sister Arleen Greenidge of St. Dominic's Children's Home. Sister, welcome back to the program.
You're too kind.
Well, it's always a great pleasure having you here, and I know you're doing such good work, and we'd like to know what's going on at the home and some of the challenges that I know you're constantly facing.
Wow. Vernon, do you have enough time?
Well, we're going to do 2 programs, so I think we have possibly enough time today. Well, first of all, perhaps you should explain to people who haven't seen you before on the show or know about the work of the excellent work of St. Dominic's Children's Home, the history of St. Dominic's. It really is a long history.
Yeah, a long history. St. Dominic's Children's Home was founded in 1871,
In Belmont.
In Belmont, yes. It was founded by a Dominican priest who was stationed in Port of Spain, Rosary Parish, actually. And seeing the children who were on the streets, a lot of the children on the streets at that point in time were really orphaned. Remember, you were coming out of indentureship. We had come out of indentureship into so a lot of come out of emancipation.
Right.
And you had the East Indian family now that really many of them were badly hit by the changes in their whole lifestyle that coming to this part of the world brought. And so there were a lot of children on the streets who were orphaned. St. Mary's Children's Home had been founded prior to St. Dominic's, actually. And so inspired by the work of the Anglican Church, Father Forestier decided to start a similar kind of work, what was then called the Belmont Orphanage. And a few years later, in 1876, I believe, the Dominican sisters, but he was a Dominican priest.
Right.
So he brought in his Dominican sisters, and so my particular congregation became responsible. So St. Dominic's Children's Home has been 140-something years in existence.
That's amazing for the institution in this country to be running.
It is. I had continuous, unbroken service. But of course...
And more so the fact that the Dominican sisters have been there doing it for that long as well.
For this period of time. But more and more, well, from its very beginning, from its inception, it was the work of clergy, religious, and lay people, because Father Forestier depended very heavily on the support of benefactors or benefactresses, because they were largely women. So throughout its history, there's been that synergy, that working together between these different groups of people. But the contribution of the lay people really has grown significantly, so that the organization itself is largely in terms of the delivery of hands-on care, and it's largely done now by lay people. So you find that our sisters are more involved in the policy making, that kind of aspect of the home. And of course, doing whatever, because we live on the compound, on the main campus at Belmont. So everything from pepper sauce, I don't know how our children love pepper sauce so Vernon. Everything from pepper sauce to cuts, to complaints, to everything, the sisters get involved.
But essentially, you're surrogate parents at that point, aren't you?
That's exactly what we are. It's a 24/7 job. Not a job, it's a ministry, really.
How many sisters actually are there?
Within the community itself, we are a community of 6 sisters, right? And as I say, the hands-on delivery of care itself is delivered largely by lay people. So our staff altogether, we have a staff of over 80 people, because remember, it's a 24/7 ministry, and so we're responsible for all the needs of the children. So we have all kinds of services that have to be provided. So it's a big enterprise.
There would at some point have been a fundamental shift then. I mean, if you've got a home being run by sisters, that's a very different approach. That's a sort of a labor of love approach.
Yeah,
a ministry, as you said.
A ministry. Work, really.
Yeah. To lay people who are there perhaps because they need a job or whatever other reason, or maybe they genuinely have their heart in it.
Yes,
I'm sure
I think for many.
But there must have been at some point where that transition occurred.
Well, at one point, I think it was in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, somewhere there, the home was placed under the Statutory Authority Services Commission. So in order to give the workers better packages, because as you would imagine, in the days when it was largely on donations and grants, you would not have been able to give people a satisfactory or fair wage and proper package in terms of retirement and that kind of thing. So based on that desire to give a better wage, a better package to its workers, the home at that point in time was placed under the statutory authorities. So the history of St. Dominic's Children's Home is just so varied, I think I was trying to sum it up recently, specifically from the perspective of the focus on the family. Because I think if we are to identify what is the major shift or what sort of sums up the shifts that are taking place, I think one of the vital elements is that of the role of the family. St. Dominic's Children's Home, as I said, started as the Belmont Orphanage. It was literally that, it was an orphanage. Children who had no family. It moved into the Children's Home in the 60s, 70s. And again, that was largely around the issues were social displacement. Children who, some of whom were orphaned, but those who weren't really could not be with their families because of poverty, or a parent might have been on drugs, or for some reason or not, there was no one to take care of them. So in a sense, they were sort of orphaned, right? Because there was a clear sense in which there was no one out there for them, no one who could take care of them satisfactorily. So in the 70s, 80s, you had the Children's Home, St. Dominic's Children's Home, grappling with the issue of providing children, what we were calling at that point in time, family units. Because you were recognizing, remember, you were just coming into the whole child rights era and that year of the child in 1970s. And so there was a sense in which, children need family. So St. Dominic's Children's Home was about providing the children with a family. And so
that's the addition of the word home at the end. Right.
And so we started introducing what we called family units. Remember, in the orphanage model, you have children living in dormitories, and there are all kinds of stories, and you really have to take everything, understanding it in the context of the time, right? About children having to have their numbers on their clothing because there were so many children. And you had older children taking care of younger children, because you may have had one sister responsible for a whole large dormitory with maybe a lay person or two. So there was a system of care and a well-structured system of care. So that was that orphanage model, dormitory style, right? And then
almost Dickensian when you think about it.
Yes, actually. Then you had now, so in the 70s, and then coming into that consciousness of children needing family, we moved into the family unit. So we started moving away from the dormitory style to houses where I remember the dormitories would have been single sex. You would have girls' dormitories and boys' dormitories. Now to the family units where you had brothers and sisters being kept now within the same house. And that was really radical, so because, again, moving out of that sense of children need family. There was still a sense that there wasn't a family out there, or even if it was, that the family really wasn't able. So we had to create a family in here, all right? And now we're moving into a stage where our children do have families. Most, I would say 99% of the children in our care at the moment have families. And the reason why they come into care is very, very different. We are seeing a lot of children coming into care because parents or family members are, the term that they use in court, are unable or unwilling. So sometimes you have children presenting with behavioral needs, behavioral issues that family cannot manage. So they're brought into the system. Or sometimes you have children who are not safe within the family environment. For some reason or the other, they have family.
Physical abuse, sexual abuse, any possibility.
So there are some safety issues, and therefore they come. So the reason why children are coming into care is very, very different.
But that would also say that the children themselves are very, very different, because, if you're an orphan, you obviously would have certain things that you have to deal with emotionally, having no parents. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you have behavioral issues in general. But if you're actually getting a large number of kids now who have behavioral issues, that presents a whole other set of challenges for them.
So their needs are different. And factor into that family exists, and therefore, as I would share with you a little later, we hear the children speaking about, they want to go with it, they want family, they don't want the St. Dominic, they want their family, or they want a family. So you find that, as I said, so you see the whole evolution of the care system from that orphanage model to us grappling with providing children within the institution with an experience of family, now to a clear sense of how could we facilitate the earliest possible reintegration of these children into the family system, either their family of origin or a foster or custody type family, but a family in a sense in which they are individualized. They have an identity, as opposed to the family that we were speaking about in the 70s and 80s and in the early 90s in terms of the family unit. So we see the evolution, and therefore, as you would imagine, the demand for certain kinds of services now, a demand that is new to us, and therefore this is a time of real adventure, Vernon, real adventure, where we see ourselves having to transform the organization in order to meet these changed needs of the children who are coming into
And
care.
radically changed needs as well.
Radically. And one of the things I have noted as well is our children are very, what's the word to use? Sophisticated, should I say that?
Well, I think most kids now are very sophisticated.
Their tastes
yeah.
and you know, they have been formed, they've seen the same advertisements, the tastes that they have, the needs that they have also been shaped by what's happening there in
So there's an
the
element
media.
of consumerism that has
Right.
permeated
Right.
childhood.
So their expectations.
Especially if they have a family existing
Exactly.
that they were pulled away from.
Exactly.
And they would have had
Exactly.
certain benefits from that.
Exactly. Another factor, an important factor, is that they're also coming into care at an older age, right?
old are
You
we
still
talking
have
about?
some babies, but for example, at St. Dominic's Children's Home, our nursery was disestablished a number of years ago because there were less and less children coming in as babies. They've been coming in, I would say the average age of admittance now would be like 6, 7, 8 even. And over in recent times, we've seen children coming in even older than that if they're coming in as a family. So these children already have culture. They have a culture they come from. They have a family history they come from.
Inculcated
It's not
values, presumably,
values
as
that
well.
they come
Yeah.
from, expectations, experiences that they come with. So again, the scenario is very, very different.
Well, you know, Sister,
and adventure going on.
Well, you brought in something in the spirit of a picture paints 1,000 words. You brought in several pictures,
Yeah.
and these are some cards that I guess it was a project.
Yes. From time to time, regularly we receive students, social work students. So one of the agencies we receive students from, one of the universities we receive students from is Florida State University. So last year, the student at that time, she decided to do a project around having the children develop postcards to express their feelings, their sentiments, their ideas, their thoughts around living in an institution and about being away from the family. And so they did this project, and she presented a PowerPoint, and it really blew us away. You know it, they express it, but to see it, the visuals, it was really very powerful. So I thought I would share just a few of those with you.
Well, perhaps my director can run that now, so we can have a look. It's really kind of gut-wrenching, really, when you look at it. And here it is. It's going to bring it up full screen, I guess. And again, the issue of home here.
Yes. Home and normalcy. The thing of living in an institution is not normal. The children feel a stigma associated with living in a children's home. And they want their family. They want to go home.
So no matter how hard you try, you will never be that family.
And Vernon, to be honest, the children in our care have all kinds of opportunities. In terms of music, we have a music band. They can play the violin. They have all kinds of academic opportunity, all kinds of opportunities, outings. And at the end of the day, they would leave all of that behind in a moment if they could return
I guess
home.
one of the tragedies we're seeing, like that one, I miss my mommy and I miss my family. In many cases, these kids would have been pushed away by their family, wouldn't they?
Well,
Not many, in some
circumstances,
cases,
I would
yeah.
say, because I'm coming out of a systems approach. I think I prefer not to treat so much with good and bad people, but that things go wrong. And sometimes we make decisions that are not life-giving, and those decisions impact negatively upon people. And so sometimes parents do not make the right decisions, or maybe they lack the support that they need, and therefore the choices that they make have a negative impact upon their ability to care for their children. And sometimes their children are really find themselves in a place where they're in a lot of risk because of the choices that are not life-giving.
And in addition, we also have the situation of kids having kids nowadays.
That is true.
So they really aren't capable in many instances.
And then some people have to parent their children with very little support. So supervision is compromised, and children need to be properly supervised, especially in our world today, where there are so many people ready and waiting to prey upon our children. So you find it's not about bad parents, but it's sometimes about parents who don't have the correct parenting skills, or parents who do not have the support that they need. And parents themselves, as you say, who maybe themselves need parenting. Any one of those scenarios, or all three of those scenarios mixed up in one. But at the end of the day, the children are the ones who in the midst of this difficult situation are at risk and experience trauma and loss as a result. And every child coming into care has experienced loss, because especially if they're coming in at that latter age, they've lost their familiar culture, they've lost their familiar faces, they've lost the familiar routines, they've lost a certain measure of freedom of movement. And I think that's one of the things that our children find the most difficult to deal with. In order to run a children's home, you have to have rules, right? You have to have rules. And very often the children have come from a family setting, or have a history of very little in terms of structure and rules. And so it's difficult for them to make an adjustment, and they have all kinds of adjustment challenges. And of course, those challenges tell fault in behavior. So that's where a lot of the acting out behavior, I think, comes from very often. Difficulties in adjusting, and given the loss that they've experienced and the trauma that they come
Because
with.
the home, the St. Dominic's becomes then not just their home, their actual home where they live, but also the community they exist in as well.
Yes.
Whereas before they may have lived in a house, which was their home, and had a village outside or something, or Port of Spain,
Even the food might be different, Vernon. If you come from certain parts of our communities, you may have from various communities located geographically in different areas. Your diet is different. Even in terms of your pastime, the thing. Recently, if I may share a little story, a few weeks ago we did a retreat with some of our young people, and this retreat took us to Greenidge for a weekend. And I am there on the bus with them on a rather long journey, and I'm hearing all the stories. And there were 3 or 4 of the boys in the bus who, strangely enough, grew up in almost the same geographic area. They were from Mayaro, Greenidge, that stretch there. And they were talking about how they used to spend their time, how they used to go down to the river, and some really scary stories about who used to meet, not crocodile, that other thing that looks like a crocodile. Cayman, I see. So they were giving all, and the eyes were lighting up, and it struck me, these children had a life. They had a life that was taken away from them, and that's loss. So they come into our system, and it's difficult for them to make that adjustment. And so, I think those are things that we need to be mindful of when we treat with some of the difficult behaviors. Because when people are hurt people hurt people. So because the children are hurting, given this huge transition they have to make, very often not to their choosing, we may see the risk that they're at. We may see the dangers. And we may be able to rationalize, to explain why we need to remove them from these situations and place them in residential child care. But they don't necessarily understand it. So many of the children and young people who we are taking care of, hold some measure of resentment even to having been removed from their familiar, being removed from their families, no matter how messed up it was. Because of the circumstances that we understand, but they don't because they're children and placed in this other environment. So it's trauma and loss really is at the heart of a lot of the behaviors that we need to grapple with. And at the same time, an appreciation of trauma and loss is something that's relatively new to us. And therefore you find you have children hurting, and sometimes you have caregivers hurting when they are unable to find within themselves skills and maybe the understanding that they need to have as they deal with these children and young people.
And I guess ultimately the aim of St. Dominic's, and I suppose every home of its kind, would be to create good citizens, well-rounded, good, well-balanced people. Even if you start off with problems intrinsic to their nature at that point.
And we're mindful that these problems aren't the only within the population we work with. Remember, these issues are also to be found throughout our citizens, but these are the children we're responsible for. And the thing is, I remember in university, one of our lecturers reminding us that, or teaching us rather, that the only sustainable development is development that's child-centered. And that is so true. If we are truly interested in promoting in bringing about sustainable development, we need to pay more attention to what's happening to our children and young people, because they are our tomorrow. And the extent to which they have sound values, in which the extent in which they have fully developed their inner potential for greatness and for beauty, insofar as that happens, we have a lot to hope for, or very little. And I think that is what keeps me focused, because I recognize that this ministry, this work that we are doing together, it is really about, what we're going to have to offer the next generation to come.
The future of our society.
Because if we do not form sound citizens, as you said just now, if we do not form young men, children to grow into young people, to grow into adults who have integrity and can work hard and have vision, and then who's going to parent that next generation? Who is going to direct and guide and form that next generation? There's a saying, and I can't remember to quote it exactly, but this whole thing of standing on the shoulder of those who have gone before us. So that generation that's to come, they're going to be standing on our shoulders. And they're going to be standing on these people, these 14 and 15 and 16 year, the shoulders of these young people. So we need to do something to ensure that we are able to step up and provide a quality of service that we need to provide to this generation. That's the only way we can really speak about sustainable development.
We have about 4 minutes in this part one. You see, it's a good thing we arranged to have two parts.
Yes.
We haven't even touched half of what we want to do yet. But a frequent guest in this program is Verna St. Rose Graves, who obviously has the interest of children very much at heart.
Yes.
And she has said that she has seen some horror stories of abuse at children's homes in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Now, obviously, St. Dominic's is run by nuns, so I imagine it's probably a rather different scenario.
Yeah. But we also have our child. Let's not fool ourselves.
You have lay people in there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, generally, as I said, hurt people. And if you have a scenario in which the children are hurting, and you have a scenario in which caregivers are hurting, because nobody likes to come to work and not be able to meet the needs. I mean, these are people of goodwill. For whatever reason they found themselves within the service. These are people of goodwill. And all of us at the end of the day want to go home knowing that we've made some positive contribution. Nobody wants to go to work and be a failure and feel like they're hitting their heads against a wall. So insofar as we're able to make a contribution, that's how we feel good about ourselves as workers. So if that isn't happening in our children's homes, we can see how that is a recipe for situations that are certainly destructive happening, both children and caregivers. So that's one of the things that we have really since 2008 through our transformation exercise been trying to promote. The upskilling, it's a whole new skill set that caregivers need to have. And that is one of the things that we want to continue to work on, especially this year. And we do have some special areas of training that we hope to introduce in the near future if we can get some money to do it. But that is certainly Verna's cry. I think it's a cry that we do need to take seriously, that we need to provide for our caregivers the incentives and the training and the support that they need. And when we see that not happening, everybody loses, because we all blame each other. So the children blame the staff, staff blame the children, staff blame the management, and it's a situation, a system that becomes less and less life-giving. So that is why transformation, that journey we started on, I spoke about adventure. Adventure we embarked upon in 2008, that adventure is a vital one. If we are to break wherever there's evidence of that kind of destructive scenario playing itself out, we need to address it.
No, before we run out of time in this part one, would it be fair to say then that the presence of the Dominican sisters, you really are the moral compass of the home, and others carry out the day-to-day functions? Is that?
Well, we are now trying to we're trying to talk about teamwork more than taking the lead, because somebody has to take the lead. So definitely we have taken the leadership in terms of the steppers model, which I think we'll speak about next time. Yes. Right. So we have, in terms of the vision, in terms of direction, so that compassing, yes, definitely. But it does take a village to raise a child, and we will only be effective in providing that better service insofar as we are able to engage people in this process. If we cannot get the buy-in from people who have to actually deliver these services, all of the work that we've done thus far is really not going to amount to too much. So that's where we're at.
Well, Sister Arleen, we're out of time on this part one. We'll continue very shortly with our part two of our chat, and we'll talk about Steppers, the new direction for St. Dominic's Home in that part. Thank you very much for being here, Sister.
Thank you so much for that.
You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for part two.